Hello and welcome to the course Introduction to Advanced Cognitive Processes. I am Ark Verma from IIT Kanpur and we are in the 7th week of the course. We started this week talking about the interaction between cognition and emotion. We are trying to link the effects of emotional states, mood states on attention and memory, and we have been talking about those things. We will continue our discussion about the same kind of interaction today as well. So, one of the important kinds of memories that people harbor or people come across are referred to as the flashbulb memory. Flashbulb memories are memories for events that are highly traumatic or highly positively life changing events. So, most people will tell you that they have a very good memory for the time of their lives when they were going through dramatic events, say for example dramatic events in the world at large. Say for example 9/11 for the United States or 26/11 for India, or say for example winning of the 2011 World Cup. I mean both kinds of positive or negative dramatic events, and people would remember things like the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi for that matter, or so many different things. So a lot of people will tell you that I remember these, I remember information around these events rather vividly, and they show you a high degree of confidence in these kind of things. So these kind of the memories for these kind of events, these kind of dramatic events, both positive and negative, is referred to as flashbulb memories. These events are also, I have talked about this in the memory chapter in the other course a lot. So I will just kind of revise that a little bit for people. So these kind of events that happen at the time of your life when significant changes are coming, things like the point when you got your first job, the point when you got married, what were your mental condition at that point in time, what was happening around you. So the idea is in individual lives as well, or in broadly, as I was mentioning, 9/11, 26/11, assassination of Rajiv Gandhi and those kind of things, people tend to have better memory for these events. So Brown and Kulik, they basically in 1997 they proposed that dramatic events that are surprising have genuine consequences, and these genuine consequences have an individual trigger. They basically trigger a special kind of a neural mechanism, and this neural mechanism, what it does is it prints the details of such events in a more or less permanent sort of a manner in your head. So the idea is they are saying, Brown and Kulik are saying, that these events, because they are so high in significance, they are kind of automatically affecting the way you are going to encode this information, and this encoding is basically going to stay there for almost your entire life. But this proposal has been cross viewed and cross examined. So Tallarico and Rubin in 2009, rather recently, they reviewed a lot of research on flashbulb memories, and they concluded that nothing very special about the flashbulb memories in particular in terms of the underlying processing that is going on in the brain. So maybe this individual trigger that the Brown and Kulik are talking about is not really happening there in terms, at least in terms of neural processes. Flashbulb memories seem specially vivid because they typically refer to these distinctive events and sometimes suffer so little interference from other memories, because these are standout events. They are not things that you can easily mix up with other kinds of memories. Also one of the things, and I have talked about this earlier as well, also one of the things about flashbulb memories is that you kind of keep hearing and rehearing them again and again. Suppose for example a significant event happens today, and next day it is in the news, the other day it is in some panel debate, somebody is discussing about that. You go to your school or college, workplace, your colleagues and friends are talking about it, you come back, you are kind of telling your family about it a little bit. So the idea is these kind of things also, this revision, this rehearsal, that multiple repetitive rehearsal that is going on, might also be affecting how you are kind of encoding these things. So flashbulb memories in that sense are important, and they are certainly special memories that people keep on, and people show a better recall at least for a long time. Now let me talk about a different kind of memories, recovered memories. If you have read any of the literature from Sigmund Freud, or if you want to really kind of get a peek into this, you can go to the earlier course where I have talked about the history of psychology. Sigmund Freud was one of the most influential psychologists And one of the things that he talked about persistently was the effects of major traumatic events like childhood sexual abuse, and those kind of things, and the kind of memories that are generated by that. The idea is that those memories would scar an individual for life. So Freud had a different kind of a take with this, and he suggested that these kind of memories, the memories for traumatic events, often cannot be consciously recalled in your adult life, because these have been repressed, suppressed, and in some sense your ego and in some sense your thing is is trying to protect you against these things. So the idea is that these memories for traumatic events to subjected to what is referred to as motivated forgetting, and they are relegated to the unconscious mind. You remember Freud talks about that there is the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and unconscious mind. So they are saying unconscious mind is the depths of your head, and that is where these unpleasant information have been locked down and sent off. But it has been intermittently reported that sometimes in their adult lives people suddenly remember these memories, suddenly they recover these kind of memories, the repression is kind of loosened and something triggers the recall of such memories. So these memories which were repressed earlier and they kind of suddenly come back are what is referred to as the recovered memories. So the notion of recovered memories has been rather controversial, because a lot of researchers have said that these might not be real memories after all. These might be memories that basically are false memories, and sometimes are even referring to events that actually did not happen. And you kind of the people who are dealing with these recovered memories are kind of at bay, because they did not remember anything like this happened in their own lives for such a long time, and suddenly they kind of get these flashbacks, suddenly they get this knowledge that okay, this might also have happened. But there is obviously a great doubt and great debate between whether these recovered memories are genuine or not. So there could be a way to really talk about this. So Life and Feltovich, they basically in a study on adult patients admitted, and they showed that a lot of patients admitted having false memories. 80% of their cases, the therapist has suggested to them, that they had been victims of childhood sexual abuse, etc. And what these people probably did is consciously or subconsciously reconstructed events where something might like that might have happened, even though in reality nothing of that sort might have happened. So again, these kind of therapeutic things might kind of have different kind of consequences as well. Now Gerards and colleagues in 2007, they wanted to check the genuineness of these recovered memories, and so they had 3 groups of patients. They had patients who had reported recovered memories while they were in therapy, while they were in contact with the psychologist and were having these therapeutic sessions, and they had another group who said that they had recovered these memories outside therapy. They were not taking any therapy, it was not suggested by anybody, but they suddenly themselves started recalling these kind of things. And then there was a third group, a continuous memory group, which basically had all of these memories throughout their life. So they had never really forgotten that anyways. So the 3 groups were there, and Gerards and colleagues, they basically wanted to get an approximate measure of the genuineness of whatever memories these people have been reporting, and they basically asked them to provide corroborating evidence. Okay, so this is what happened in your life, can you give us some supporting evidence by way of dates, names, people who kind of confirm your account, those kind of things. So they asked these people to come up with corroborating evidence about these particular memories. Now a very interesting thing happens. So while the continuous memory group, obviously because they have not even forgotten these things, could provide most evidence, 45% of the evidence, the outside therapy group could also give kind of comparable evidence, around 37-38%. But most interestingly, the group that had reported recovering these memories inside therapy could not come up with a single evidence shared. So the idea is probably what is happening with these people is that when they are in therapy, they are in a highly suggestible state, and this person in a position of power here, the psychologist, is suggesting that that I think your problems are because you were sexually abused in your childhood, or somebody has mistreated you, and those kind of things. And a lot of times what happens is these suggestions lead to formation of memories. The human mind is rather constructive. We've talked about constructive effects of memory at length in one of the courses. If you want to really refer back, go back to the last course and kind of go through the memory lectures. I've talked about these things, but the idea is what is happening with these recovered memories is probably that people are reporting, are just kind of constructing them because of high suggestibility. Now, even though Freud basically suggested that memories recovered outside therapy could return as repressed memories because they are traumatic memories, Clancy and McNally in 2005 and 6, they found that a great majority of adults who reported recovered memories described them as confusing or uncomfortable, but none of them, or only a very few 8% of them described them as being traumatic. So, I mean, again, that claim also does not really hold a lot of water. Now, an alternative explanation could be that most spontaneously recovered memories happen because they might have been recalled because of some environmental cues, something, visiting the same place where something might have happened, or meeting the same person after 10, 20, 30 years. Those kind of cues might be used to bring back these kind of memories. So, that is a very important aspect. Clancy and McNally basically reported support for this kind of explanation, and they kind of reported that yes, participants did report that these memories were recovered because they were doing something, or they were engaging with information that could have acted as a cue. So, that is a little bit about the recovered memories. Now, let us move on to a different topic. Let us move on to memories and the emotions and what the brain has to do with it. So, strong effects of emotion on memory have been mediated. I mean, they are certainly mediated by several of the regions of the brain that deal with emotional appraisal, expression, and comprehension. But most important organ, the most important area of the brain in perceiving emotions is the amygdala. Now, the amygdala basically is buried in the front part of the temporal lobe and is associated with several emotions processing. So, what has happened is one of the reasons being that it acts as a hub. So, one of the reasons why amygdala might be so important in perception and comprehension of emotions is that amygdala acts as a hub for numerous connections to different kinds of brain regions, and it has connections to up to 90% of the entire cortex. Now, there is already a lot of evidence about the fact that the amygdala is much involved in our processing of emotional stimuli. For example, Suslov and colleagues in 2010, they presented pictures of happy and sad faces to participants in such a way that they could not have been consciously seen. They were presented for a very short duration. In spite of not being consciously accessible, these pictures of sad and happy expressions did activate the amygdala, and activations of amygdala were recorded. So, that is one part. Patients suffering from depression were found to have greater amygdala activity to sad faces than to happy ones, whereas healthy control showed more amygdala activity to happy faces than sad ones. So, the kind of emotion that is processing or that is relevant to you, that you are kind of paying more attention to, is showing greater amygdala activity. So, both of the groups of the participants are showing greater amygdala activations to faces or expressions that are matching their current mood state. Again, kind of confirms the MSDM and MCM kind of things we are talking about. Now, one of the ways to show that the amygdala plays a very important part in determining long-term memory for emotional material could be to show that the amygdala is important for learning of such material. So, if you can show that during the learning of such kind of material, amygdala activation is there, during the encoding of such material, amygdala activation is there, then when the recall is happening and again you find similar amygdala activation, then you can kind of link these two things very cleanly. So, a related prediction could be that emotional items being remembered will be greater when they are associated with high levels of amygdala activity at the time of learning. This is precisely what happens in Murthy and colleagues 2010 study. They conducted a meta-analysis. They are not really conducting an experimental study. They kind of conducted a meta-analysis of several studies, and they did obtain support for the prediction. Good long-term memory for emotional material was associated with higher activation at the time of learning in the network of brain regions, including amygdala and other parts of the temporal lobe that are involved with memory. Other kind of research has suggested that the effects of being in an emotional state at the time of learning are especially great on subjective vividness. The amount of detail that you will recall if you are in a particular kind of emotional state might be very interesting, might be too much. So, Kensinger and colleagues in 2011, they assessed amygdala activities while participants studied emotional and neutral objects, things that have some emotional value and then again neutral objects. Amygdala activity at learning predicted the vividness of recall, the kind of details they would be able to come up with for these kind of objects, but it did not really predict the number of details, but the vividness, how clearly, how confidently you are remembering about these things. I would talk about an interesting disease, the Urbach-Wiethe disease. The Urbach-Wiethe disease is basically one in which the amygdala and the adjacent areas of the brain are destroyed, and then there is a reduction in the intensity of emotional experience. So, people whose amygdala is damaged, people whose amygdala and entire adjacent regions are damaged. So, Cahill and colleagues in 1995, they studied BP. BP was suffering from UWD, and he was basically in an experimental setting told a story in the middle of which there is a very emotionally charged event that occurs. There is a boy who kind of suffers a major accident and loses his leg. Healthy controls showed much better recall of this emotionally charged event, because obviously emotions enhance memory, but BP, this patient of UWD on the other hand, recalled the emotional event less well than the neutral parts or the preceding parts of the story. So, that kind of tells you that how important amygdala is in processing of emotional information. Amygdala is also involved in memory for positive information as well as negative information. Seibert and colleagues in 2003, they compared the long term memory for positive, negative and neutral pictures in healthy controls and 10 UWD patients. What they found was that poorer recognition was showed for memory for all picture categories, but their memory impairment was greater for positive pictures and least for neutral ones. So, in the patients of UWD, they are much less able to appreciate positive emotions and or emotional material in general. So, in summary, if I just try to sum it up, several findings on patients suffering from UWD have been reported, and they have been compared and contrasted with healthy individuals, emotional tasks, memory tasks and those kind of things. In both cases, there is solid evidence that the amygdala does play a very important role in enhanced memory for emotional information. That is all from my side in this lecture. We will continue talking about cognition and emotion in the next lecture.